Before we look at our next work of art, I want to establish ourselves not only in Florence, but with one specific family, the Medici family. Now, the Medici family gets a lot of attention in the art world and in the larger dialogue of the history of Western civilization, because this family in Florence becomes an extremely influential powerhouse, not only in the patronage of art and architecture and local government like Florence, but they are going to expand in power and influence across the Italian peninsula into international exchanges of power in mainland Europe, or I should say beyond the borders of the Italian peninsula. They will become cardinals, they will become popes, they will become, or they will marry into the French royal family. And we can go on and on and on. There's mini series about them, there's movies about them, there's books about them. So yes, we're going to talk about the Medici family for us in this art history class as they relate to, art. Now, we're going to start our look at the Medici family with Cosimo de' Medici. Now, the name Medici, it should tell you exactly where they started or how they established themselves. The name Medici means of medicine. They most likely started out as doctors in the field of medicine, and then bought some property, bought some land, became more influential in politics. By the time of Cosimo de' Medici, he has firmly established the family not only in Florence as a political powerhouse and one of the more famous and powerful families, but also as a patron to the arts, meaning they pay for major commissions of artworks, both personal and public. When Cosimo de' Medici takes over as head of the family, they are bankers, they are merchants, and Cosimo, who is credited as beginning the first public library since the ancient world, is seen as a strong figurehead and an establisher of the Medici within Renaissance art and architecture. Cosimo will often bring in artists, feed them, clothe them, educate them, along with his sons, as a way to not only literally feed the arts, but also to show a thriving, healthy, powerful Medici family, and therefore powerful Florence to the larger world. Now, when Cosimo dies, there is a lot of drama, and I'm not going to get into it, but I will just tell you that the end of the drama, well, not the end, but the conclusion after the death of Cosimo is his younger grandson, Lorenzo de' Medici, takes over as head of the Medici family. And he too, like his grandfather, is going to be a patron of the arts. His nickname was Lorenzo the Magnificent, or Il Magnifico. I know you might be thinking, that's quite a nickname to give yourself. Well, he was a member of many humanist societies, and he funded building and painting and sculpture projects. He was praised as quite a good poet, and here this is a realistic portrait of him from the time. And I mean, you might think like, oh, he's got a scowl on his face, he's not very hot, but he was a hit with the ladies, okay? He was El Magnifico to them. Just gonna say that, little gossip on the side. Okay, so why do I bring all of this up? Because I want us to get an understanding of the Medici family. They're gonna follow us through the semester, and this concept of paying for not only the artwork, but helping the artists by feeding, clothing. They would often give a series of rooms in their house, and the artist would live with them with the understanding that for payment of room and board, the artist would then pay back with art. In fact, it was this kind of relationship that we see in the creation of Donatello's David. So Donatello was commissioned by the Medici family for this artwork. It is a bronze statue of the Old Testament figure David. It was originally displayed in the Medici Palace courtyard. So this would have been in the more public area of their private residence. Now let me tell you the story of David. He is an Old Testament, so from the Old Testament of the Bible. He's an Old Testament prophet and becomes a king of the Hebrews. And as a young boy, he was a simple shepherd boy. And so that's what we see here is a young boy, and he's wearing a straw hat that identifies him as a shepherd boy. Often shepherds would wear these wide-brimmed hats to keep out the hot sun and shade their faces. Now, the story of David we see depicted here is when he is a young boy, a shepherd boy, and he becomes a biblical hero. So David is part of the Hebrew nation, and at this time the Hebrews are in this horrific war for territory and control against the Philistines. And as a young boy out on the field, he receives a message from God that he can defeat the Philistines. He goes up to the front lines and he tells the generals that he has God on his side and that he can fight and defeat the Philistines. Now, at first they don't believe him, and he says, "You please trust me. God spoke and he said that I will defeat the Philistines." And they said, "Okay, well, do you want some armor?" He said, "No, I have God on my side." And then they said, "Do you want some weapons?" And he said, "No, I'll just take the weapons of a shepherd boy." Now, I tell you this, not that he goes out naked, like you see here. We're going to talk about why Donatello makes him naked. But in the story of David, he goes out as a shepherd boy with the simple weapons of a shepherd. What would those weapons be? Rocks and a leather strap. This sling, he would then throw or hurl rocks out at predators who would be trying to attack his sheep. So he would protect his sheep by throwing these rocks at the enemy and scaring them away. Little wolves, little, vermin. Get out, get out, get away from my sheep. So he takes his rock, he takes his leather strap that he would sling those rocks, and he goes to the front lines. And there he is met with the enemy, the Philistines. And more specifically, the single soldier standing in front of him. The soldier for the Philistines is a giant. He's described as being somewhere between 7 to 10 feet tall. And his name is Goliath. And Goliath stands looking down at David. And David trusts that God is on his side. He takes his rock, he takes his sling, winds it up, and shoots that rock straight at Goliath. It lands right on Goliath's forehead, and Goliath, knocked out, falls to the ground. And then he cuts off his head. With this victory over Goliath, the rest of the Hebrew soldiers believe God is on their side, and they quickly defeat the Philistines. That is the story of David that we see being depicted here. How so? Well, we see our young man, and do you see Goliath? There he is. Oh, whoa! The head of Goliath. This massive sword here must be Goliath's sword. And we see David standing on top, the victor in this battle. Okay, wow. So he's the hero of the story. Now, I flash to this statue yet again. I'm giving you the name of it now. I thought you should know it by now. So this is an ancient Greek work, and the statue is called the Spear Bearer, or the Doryphoros, or Doryphorus, and it's by a famous guy named Polykleitos. You don't need to know all of this for our lesson right now, but I'm making this connection between the nudity of Donatello and the nudity of the heroic male in ancient Greek and Roman art. Hero, hero. If you're thinking maybe it's just this statue, Miss Cortez, no, it's not. Even before Polycletios's Doryphoros, there were heroic male nudes. Now, why nude? Why does the guy always have to have his clothes off? Great question. Two reasons. One, it's to appreciate the male body, because in the ancient Greek world, the male body was a connection to their gods. You would dedicate your physical strength, or you would practice physical strength and craft and hone your body as a physical representation of your dedication to the gods. Donatello then interprets that for this figure here of David. We see him in the nude body. The Christian understanding of the human form is that humans are made in the image of God. And so then to see and appreciate the male form is to see and appreciate God's creation. So we have similar ideas of nudity. Also, in the ancient Greek world, they preferred not to clothe these figures as a way to keep them timeless. Because think about it, even today, if somebody were to wear something from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you'd see them and think, well, they're not like me. They're wearing something that's like super old. But if they are nude, there are no visual clues to their time, their origin, and so they are universal. And here in the ancient Greek world, we see that male universal nude, and Donatello is then reinterpreting that here for his statue of David. Also, in the statue of David, what is the pose that he is standing in? Contrapposto. Exactly. So we see this counterbalance of the body, just like we saw in the ancient Greek world. Also, remember that contrapposto is a balance of mind. So we see a man who is not only in harmony with the physical world, but his spiritual connection with God. We see him in this contemplative pause, this moment where his body seems to be calm in this rise of chaos. He's just killed a giant, and he, instead of flaunting it out and be like, yeah, he stands in this moment of reflection and piety to God. So a balance of opposites, a balance of mind and body. Let's look at him in more detail, a little bit more close up. So we see a young man, we see that shepherd hat, his long hair falling to his shoulders. There's a little bit closer view of him. And then if we were to look at the head of Goliath there, wow, look at the details of this figure. Now, oftentimes when I show this statue in class, some students say, he looks like a girl. That's a guy? Yes, it's a guy. We know. We see his body. But why would Donatello depict a young boy at this age? Like, what age is he? How old do you think he is? Now, if we were in class together, you might be shouting out some numbers. Maybe 10, 11. He's at that age just before puberty hits, when boys and girls are fairly androgynous. Why would Donatello choose to depict David at this age? I mean, the story just says young man, but why such a young man? That's a great question, and we're going to address it. But let's take in another element of David. The people of Florence during the Renaissance, they identified with David. People of Florence saw themselves as David, and every enemy that they faced was Goliath. And evidence such as the sudden death of the King of Naples was used as evidence to support that God was on their side. They were the small little guy, David, against the world, Goliath. And so statues of David were all over the city of Florence as representations of Florence against the enemy, and they will defeat the enemy because God is on their side. In fact, when the Medici family, here this is a better image, when the Medici family commissioned Donatello to create the statue of David, the city of Florence was under attack yet again. And this was from the Duke of Milan. The Duke of Milan in the north was threatening to overthrow the Republic of Florence. And just like how the King of Naples had died suddenly, so too did the Duke of Milan. Just died suddenly. And the threat was gone. And the people of Florence interpreted this as God was on their side yet again. So here we see David as Florence, and Goliath, their most current or most recent threat, was the Duke of Milan, and he was dead. So now, keeping in mind that the statue of David was often a symbol of Florence, can you write that down? Write that down separately from these notes. I want you to put big stars around it, underline it. I want you to write Florence equals David, or David is a symbol of Florence, or David is a portrait of Florence. Florence sees itself as David, and everything else is Goliath. Okay? Okay. Because it's going to come back. We're going to see it again. So here, Donatello's David. Why does he have him so young? Well, if Florence is David, then Florence is young. And I just told you that Florence is on the rise. Florence is growing in power. Florence is growing in reputation. Florence is growing in control over the Italian peninsula. Florence is full of potential. Donatello shows young David just before puberty, when he is full of potential, full of change. So just as Florence is full of change, potential for change, so too is David. Now, I love this statue, but it does kind of oog me out. There are a few elements in it. First, the fact that he is so young in modern scholarship of art history has come to a larger dialogue of child pornography and pedophilia in art. The discussion is something that is bigger than we can talk about in this class. I just want you to be aware that this statue of David by Donatello is often included in that. In terms of the scope of sexuality and the Renaissance, the statue is often discussed as a symbol of underground or hidden homosexuality among the elite Florentine Republic classes. And I mean, just to kind of to emphasize some of these elements that kind of gross me out, there is a kind of soft tactility or tactile touch quality to the statue. If you look at the close-up of David's foot on Goliath's beard, there's like a tickle. The beard kind of curls up over his toes. I mean, like, toes are very sensitive and erotic. And then this guy's mouth is right there, and then the tickle. And then if you notice his hat, he's got these feathered wings attached to the sides of his hat, his helmet. He's got these wings attached to the sides of his helmet. And if we look around the back of the statue, you can see how those wings curl up and tickle the interior thigh of David, which is it's just too much. I can't. It makes me uncomfortable. And I draw your attention to it because it is a discussion in contemporary or modern art history and art history of today. And if you want to know more about this type of dialogue, email me and I can give you some articles. One former student of mine who also cast things in bronze said that this curve of the feathers was also probably there to help support and strengthen the leg that is bearing a lot of the weight of the statue. I get it. I mean, structurally it makes sense, but does it need to go up that high? Okay, that's all I want to say about that. Next artwork.